Well, welcome everybody. It's so nice to see you virtually. I'm delighted to be here with you this evening. Thank you to Dr. Jyoti for inviting me. This presentation is on differentiation strategies for the classroom, and it's really designed for faculty at Siddhana Institute and students as well, students who are going into teacher education. So I will get started, and I encourage you to, again, to unmute your video if you are comfortable doing that so we can see each other. First I want to just thank Mr. Paul Siddhana for his leadership of Siddhana Institute, Dr. Jyoti Siddhana, General Secretary, for this invitation, for inviting me to be a part of the advisory board and for inviting me to speak today. P.S. Gill, School Administrator, and of course, Manpreet, who is working in the background today, admitting people and monitoring the chat. So thank you, Manpreet, for being here. Manpreet is a student at Siddhana Institute. And then also I want to say thank you to all the faculty, staff, and students who are online today. We're up to 28, and I hope a few more will be joining as we go through the evening. So thank you all, and we'll begin. So this is sort of an overview of the talk, just so you understand, you have a sense of where we're going to be going. I've broken it into 4 parts. First, a quick getting to know each other. Part 2, I'd like to define and understand what differentiation is, because as you, as teachers and teacher candidates know, one of the first things that it's helpful to do when we're trying to learn a new concept is to define it. So we're going to go over the definition of differentiation, what exactly that means. And then I'm going to give you in part 3 some practical strategies for classroom practice. And these are equally applicable for college faculty and teachers of students in the grades. And then we'll wrap up with a closing. And of course, I welcome questions at the end. So you can use the chat for that, or we can unmute you if you choose to do that. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Matthew Swerdloff. I am an adjunct professor of education at the State University of New York in New Paltz in the Educational Leadership Program. I have been a classroom teacher in grades K through 8, and I have been a school administrator. And my career in education in New York State goes about 30 years. And now I'm semi-retired from the public school system, and I work as a professor. I had the pleasure of visiting India in 2013 as a Fulbright specialist. I spent a lot of time in West Bengal and in the north of India at Vishva Bharati and visiting other universities, and it was really, really very, very meaningful for me. So I have a special place in my heart for India and all of you in education programs in India. As Dr. Jyoti mentioned, I am honored to be a member of the Siddhana Board of Advisors and a editorial board member of Education India Journal. So where I would want to give you a sense of where I work and where it is. So the State University of New York, we call it SUNY, S-U-N-Y. It is actually the largest public university in the United States. New York State is one of the most populous states, second to California, and the system is the largest in the country. 64 campuses, colleges, universities, community colleges, technical college. Where I work is called SUNY New Paltz. It's a liberal arts college. Originally, it was a school of education. That was the first school, and it has been expanded to include fine and performing arts, science, engineering, business, and education. And SUNY New Paltz has over 7,000 students. And we are very happy that this year we're fully in person. Everything is face-to-face on campus, and we're doing really, really well with managing in terms of coronavirus. So where is it? Here's a little map of the United States. You see the state of New York. And you see where in New York State. We're about 90 minutes north of Manhattan in a rural area, so in the country. It's a great place. I'm happy to be here and happy to share with you today. So I'd like to get a sense of who's here, who's on the call. And if you could, in the chat, just type the word faculty, staff, student, or other, so we know who you are. You can just type in those one word. If you're a faculty member or a teacher, if you're a staff person, a student, or other. So we have student. And if you're on Facebook, I think you can use the comments.
I can request all the members to just kindly put your details in the chat box, either as faculty members, staff members, students, and others.
Thank you,
Just make
Manpreet.
it quick, please.
So mostly students so far, few faculty. Okay, and the next question. Where are you connecting from? Are you home, school, in a coffee shop, on your bicycle, in your car? Where are you right now? Just one word. Yes, I know it's 8:30 at night there, so most of you from home. Well, thank you for taking time from your evening. I know it's late, and I appreciate your being here. So we'll get right in. So let's start with what is differentiation. And differentiation is not a new concept. It's one that we in education have been learning about and using for many years. And I know you probably have some exposure to it. And I'm just going to share, my perspective on differentiation, what it is, and how it can be beneficial to our students. So really, we think of it in terms of a teacher reacting to the needs of a specific student. And that's really simple. It's a move away from traditional teaching, which is lecture, like I'm doing right now. And it's a move away from the assumption that all students are the same. One thing we know is that all students are not the same. Just like everybody here on this call, we have faculty, we have students, we have staff. So in a classroom, the traditional method of teaching is standing in front of the classroom, lecturing, and assuming that everybody is the same. And differentiation kind of shakes up that assumption and says that's not really accurate. All students are not the same, and they don't all learn the same. So we want to keep in mind that we want to maximize the capacity of each student, and that's what differentiation does. We want to eliminate competition between students and let students compete with themselves, let students measure their own growth and progress. And keep in mind that differentiated classrooms are excellent first and differentiated second. And what that means is we need to be skilled and educated and adaptable teachers first. And differentiation is one tool that we can use to reach the goal of educating every student. So this is sort of the heart of differentiation. And when we talk about differentiation here in the United States, we talk about it in terms of 4 areas: content, process, product, and environment. And I will explain each of those, and it's really kind of important to understand those differences because it is a real foundation to understanding differentiation. So content is, if you think about it as what do we want our students to learn? So the content might be the history of the early empires on the Indian subcontinent, or content might be the era of British colonial rule, understanding that. Content might be World War II in Europe. Content might be learning to read, or learning mathematical equations, or understanding the scientific process. Content is the what, the information that we want students to grasp. Process, we think of as the how, H-O-W. How do we want students to learn? Do we want them to learn by lecture? Do we want them to learn by independent research? Do we want them to learn by group activities? Do we want them to work in pairs? Do we want them to work in teams of 5? Do we want them to work individually? So process is how they learn. Content is what they learn. Product is, we think of product in terms of what the students are producing to show they have learned. So a product in a classroom might be a report, a traditional report. A product might be a presentation like I'm doing right now. A product might be a play. A product might be
evaluation.
Say again?
Evaluation.
Okay, yes. A product might be a poster board if someone is doing their dissertation. So the product is going to be how the student demonstrates that they have learned. And the fourth area is what we call environment. And environment is where. Where is the student? Is the student working at home? Is the student working in the classroom? Is the student working out in the field outside the classroom? Is the student doing research and visiting various sites in their town or community? So the environment is the where. Where are they learning? Is their classroom bright and well lit? Is it dark? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is there loud music playing, or is it quiet? So the environment is going to be where the student is and what that is like. So we take those 4 areas, and that's really, when we think about differentiation, it's not just one. It can be all 4. And sometimes it's too hard to differentiate all 4 of those. So in a specific lesson, we might choose just 1 or 2. The other thing to keep in mind is the student. So the content, process, product, and environment are really sort of what the teacher brings to the classroom. Interest, readiness, and profile. This is what the student brings. So we want to always differentiate in terms of considering the interest of the student, their readiness to learn, and their learning profile. So if you have a student that really likes science, that's their interest. We want to capitalize on that. If their readiness is high, meaning they had been well fed, they're nourished, their home is safe, they have books at home, they can read at grade level, they have a high level of readiness. If the student has a home that's unstable, they have no reading materials at home, they have a hard time getting to school, they're not well fed, their readiness might be low. And what is their learner profile? Are they an active learner? Do they do well sitting and learning, or do they need to move around the room? So we want to think about all of those areas. So what is not differentiation? So there's a little quote there. I don't know if you can read it on your screen. It's from Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And what that means is we need to meet people, students, where they are. We need to really meet students where they are in terms of their ability and their interest. Sometimes people get frightened when they think about differentiation. They think, oh my goodness, I have to create a different lesson for every student, and that's not the case. We think about profiles of students, and we kind of want to group them. I want to talk really quickly about fairness, because this comes up often when people talk about differentiation. So fairness, we want to talk about two terms, equality and equity. And if you can see this picture, equality is on the left, and it means everyone gets the same thing. And that's a good notion. However, the person in the blue shirt doesn't need the box to sit on, right? Because that person is tall enough. So equality is not helping that person, and it's giving that person a box that they don't need. Equity, the person on the right, is everybody is getting what they need. So the person in the blue shirt doesn't need a box, the person in the red shirt needs one, and the person in the purple shirt needs two. So when we talk about differentiation, we want to think about it in terms of equity, not equality. And really simply way to say equity is every student gets what they need. Not every student gets the same thing. So the goal of differentiation is for every student to learn as much as possible. That's pretty straightforward. And one way we do that is the teacher uses grade level benchmarks to measure students' progress as they go and differentiate as they go. Why should I differentiate? So we should differentiate because our students come to us already differentiated themselves. And what that means is, and this is a really important thing to understand, every student is different. Every student has different interests, readiness, and profile. And because of that, every student deserves different instruction, and that's where equity comes in. So equity means we recognize how students are different, and we try to meet them where they are. We try to adjust our instruction to meet the needs of every student as much as possible, and that can be hard. If it's a big classroom with a lot of different needs, that can be very challenging. So I'm not by any means saying this is easy. So don't think I'm saying that. I'm saying this is a goal. This is sort of something we should strive for, and we may get there and we may not, but we hope to. So some characteristics of a differentiated classroom. Students are partners in their success. That means they're not passive, right? They're active, they're engaged because the teacher engages with them. It's not a situation where they come, sit, take notes, listen, and leave. There's dialogue with the teacher as much as is feasible in a crowded classroom. We want every student to be challenged. So some of you probably are familiar with Vygotsky and his concept of the zone of proximal development. Essentially, we want every student to be challenged to the point that it pushes them forward in their learning, but not too much. We don't want them to be challenged so they're frustrated. And we don't want no challenge because then they become apathetic and disinterested. So it's the job of the teacher to challenge the student at sort of the perfect level as much as possible. Flexibility. So the differentiated classroom is a flexible classroom. It means that the teacher is able to adapt instruction to the needs of the student. That's really the simplest way to say it. The teacher is able to adapt instruction to the needs of the student. And we have ways to do that. We have certain tools that we can use, but that's the heart of differentiation. It's flexibility and adaptation. So if we think about teaching a unit, typically, we have our content as teachers, and we want students to learn that content. So we're going to present it and then test them on it. In a differentiated classroom, the first thing we want to do is determine what we want students to know. So this is the KUDS, K-U-D-S, what we want them to know, understand, and do. What we want them to know, understand, and do. So what we want them to know is, again, I'll use the analogy or I'll use the example of history because that's an easy one. We want them to understand, for example, in this unit, how the British Empire came to India and what that era was like. That's what we want them to know. We want them to understand the implications of that, how that affected the culture and the people. And what we want them to do is to demonstrate their understanding, right? And we want them to demonstrate it by either a research paper, a presentation, an activity, a play, something like that. So we determine what do we want them to know, understand, and do. And then we find out what they already know. There's no point in teaching a student something they've already know, right? So we want to find out what they already know by pre-assessing them. And that is something that the teacher will create, that pre-assessment. And then we're going to compile that pre-assessment and then plan our instruction to meet the needs of those students. So in a typical classroom, we might have students that know nothing about the content. We might have students that know something, and we might have students that already have mastered the content. If you give a pre-assessment and you have your 20 questions about the topic, and you have 5 students that get all 20 questions right, why would you teach them this topic? They should be doing something else, an extension or a challenge for them. You might have 20 students who get none of the questions right. So those are the students that really need to get this instruction. And then you might have 5 students in the middle that know some of the content. So we want to think about, before we plan instruction, we want to know where our students are, what they know, and plan our instruction to meet that need. During the unit, we want to think about varying the way we teach. So this is really important. And I know that in India, the culture is very much teacher-centric, meaning the teacher is sort of the center of the classroom very often and will use lecture. And that is a valid approach. But one thing about differentiation that I said earlier is flexibility. So any one approach all the time is not as good as varying your approach as a teacher. So whole group lessons, that's fine. And typically in a differentiated classroom, that is how we start. So we might lecture to the whole class on sort of some background knowledge on the topic. And then we want to break those students into teams, small groups, pairs, where they can have some guided practice. So where they can kind of work at their level using the variety of activities that you have created for them. And then we also, it's really important that students have some independent practice. So you can see that in this model, we have three methods of instruction. We have whole group, we have guided practice, and we have independent practice. And that ensures that students who learn in those different modes are getting some instruction in their preferred mode of learning. And that's really a hallmark of a differentiated classroom, that students receive instruction in a variety of ways. And again, I will say this is much harder for the teacher than just lecturing. But it is also much more effective, and we know that students do better in a differentiated classroom because they have more opportunities to adapt and receive instruction in a variety of ways. So independent work is really important for students. Some students, however, don't do well with it. So we need to be aware as teachers, you know, who this is ideal for and who it's not. So we give open-ended activities, but modify it for each student and provide students a choice. One of the key hallmarks of a differentiated classroom is student choice. We want to give students a choice in different ways that they can learn. In a differentiated classroom, we're assessing as we go. We don't just assess at the end. We assess. We assess as the lesson is progressing so that we can monitor student progress. This is a key factor of a differentiated classroom. We want to monitor student progress and adapt our instruction as we go. 3 kinds of assessments to be aware of in a differentiated classroom: the pre-assessment, the formative assessment, and the summative assessment. So the pre-assessment I talked about before in terms of what the students know. The formative assessment is during the unit. We want to have benchmarks. Let's say it's a 6-week unit on the history of the colonial era. We might want to do a formative assessment at 2 weeks and at 4 weeks to check in and see where students are and adapt our instruction and perhaps reteach if we need to, or provide extension activities for students that are ready for that. And then, of course, at the end of that 6-week unit, we want a summative assessment to measure where our students are and what they've learned and their progress. So at the end of the unit, we always want to, in a differentiated classroom, we want to review. And this is an opportunity for students to share with the class what they've learned. We'll do that post-assessment, that summative assessment, to see where the class is, where every student is. And then, of course, there may be students who need follow-up. There may be students who need reteaching or other independent work because they missed part of the content, and your post-assessment will tell you who has missed and what they've missed. So I've been talking about the classroom a lot, but let me talk about the school, the differentiated school. So if you're a head of school or principal, and you want to really ensure that your entire school is differentiated, we want to really make sure that we support our teachers and provide a lot of instruction to our teachers on how to differentiate. So today is a 1-hour presentation. Really, this could be a 3-credit course. We could spend 150 hours talking about differentiation and practicing it and learning the theories and specific ways to differentiate. So today we're getting a quick snapshot. But differentiated instruction doesn't work with ineffective teachers. So as I said earlier, we need teachers that are really going to be able and willing to try something new and understand that differentiated instruction is really an effective way to meet the needs of all of our students. And it's a way of thinking about teaching and learning more than a specific strategy or skill set. It's a way of thinking in terms of we want to recognize, as I said at the very beginning, that our students come to us already differentiated. They are differentiated people. They have different interests, they have different readiness, and they have different profiles. So our goal as educators is to deliver instruction and provide instructional opportunities for them that meet them where they are, that challenge them to learn based on their interest, readiness, and profile. So if we're going to embrace differentiation, we need to know what students understand at the beginning and at the end. We need to understand that learning is an active process. Learning is not passive. So it's a very small number of students that can sit and listen to a lecture and really integrate it and really master it. Most students need some sort of active way of engaging with the content. It could be writing, it could be reteaching. There's a lot of different ways. And teachers who are trying or practicing differentiation need to continually reflect, because it's a process where they're going to make mistakes, they're going to adapt, they're going to learn, they're going to try different things. As a school leader, if you are a school leader, we want to maximize the number of expert teachers, because expert teachers teach students the most important things, meaning the most important content in the most effective ways, and differentiation is one of those effective ways. There are others. This is the one we're talking about today. So that's the end of part 2, the definition of differentiation. If anybody has any questions at this point, I encourage you to put them in the chat. Just type them right in. Before we go into part 3, let's see if there's any questions. Okay, so we'll move forward. And what I'm going to talk about next is some practical strategies. So these are very specific ways that you can try in your classroom to differentiate instruction. So I've talked a lot about theory. I've talked about content, process, product, and environment, a learner's readiness, interest, and profile. Next part of the presentation have 6 or 7 very specific strategies that you can take with you and try. And I tried to make them something that you can really just practice with, because this may be new to you, and I want you to have an opportunity to try some of this out. So the first one is learning stations. So rather than having your students sit in rows facing forward, you move your seats into groups, and you have them working in groups of 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on how many students in your classroom. And each of those stations is a different activity, and you have students rotate through those stations. So you might set 20 minutes, you might set 40 minutes. The students will move to a station, they will do some activity, and then they will, after the time goes, they will move to the next station. Typically in this scenario, one of those stations is the teacher, and the teacher will stay at that station, and 3 or 4 or 5 students will come to the teacher and have an opportunity to interact with the teacher in that small group process. And the chart that you're looking at shows an example of this using for literacy, where students are moving through a literacy station scenario, where they do some reading, they do some speaking, and they do some writing, and then they go meet with the teacher. Another great differentiation strategy is called tic-tac-toe. So in this scenario, tic-tac-toe is a game that you probably know. It's a grid of 9 boxes. And you make this grid yourself on a piece of paper or on the board. And so you have one content area, but you provide 9 different product options. So the students are going to learn the content, and then you give them 9 ways that they can demonstrate they've learned it. So they might draw a picture, they might perform a play, they might write a song, they might write a poem, they might write a research paper. And they can choose one of those 9 options and work independently and present that to you to demonstrate that they have learned. This is a really fun tool. The students really like this because it gives them some choice, and it gives them an opportunity to pick something that is interesting to them. And it also gives them an opportunity to succeed in demonstrating their learning. Think, pair, share. So this tool is used to give students an opportunity to work alone. That's the think, where they will experience some new content that will be presented, and they'll have some time to reflect on it. And then they're going to have a pair, so they'll be with a partner, and they'll discuss. So you might prompt them with a question, and they'll think about the question, and then you pair them up and then discuss the question, and then share. The pair presents to the full class what they learned and what they explored. Journaling. So this is independent work. So you can see that in the tools I'm giving you, some are independent, some are small groups, some are pairs, some are full class. Again, Remember, flexibility is the key to the differentiated classroom. So we want variety of instructional approaches, and journaling is an independent process. So, and it's an opportunity to give students time to work alone. However, you can vary the way they journal. So it doesn't necessarily have to be narrative. It can be narrative or poetry, or it could be pictures, or any other way. It could be graphic comics. It could be art. So journaling doesn't only mean words. It just means independent writing of some sort. So educational technology tools have an opportunity to really differentiate in many ways. So I'm sure you've all used different websites and apps, and in the classroom setting, they provide many ways to differentiate in terms of content and product. And so examples might be something like Khan Academy that has video lessons. So that's presenting the content using a video tool, or Encyclopedia Britannica, which is presenting the content in a written format. Some students might really like to watch the video. Some students might not enjoy that. They might hate watching videos, and they might prefer to sit quietly and read the text. So educational technology tools is another great way to differentiate because it provides content in so many different ways. So project-based learning is a wonderful tool that allows students to work in groups, and it allows them to vary their environment in order to focus on a specific project. So typically in project-based learning, the classroom teacher is going to assign a task, and the task will enable the students to explore some content at a deep level and then produce a project. But they have so much freedom within this because they can work inside, they can work outside, they can work in the stairwell, they can work on the roof, they can work in the classroom. So they can vary the environment, they can vary their pace, they can vary their resources. Maybe they're going to use the computer for research. Maybe they're going to go to the library. Maybe they're going to go interview someone who has some knowledge on their content area. So project-based learning gives students a lot of opportunities to vary the process, the product, and the environment. And finally, self-reflection and goal setting. This is something we really don't do enough of, I think, in education, is really give students time to reflect. And it could just be 5 minutes at the end of the day where they sit and think about what they've learned, what's the highlight of the day. And even for us as educators, we don't do that enough. So this can be something that's assigned to them, and they do it in their own environment, at their own pace, in their own way. And it's really an effective way to have students internalize what they've learned and it could be at the end of a unit, a self-reflection on the highlights of the unit. What was it like to work together on this project? What was it like to work alone, etc. Okay, I want to share with you the source of most of this information. So Dr. Carol Ann Tomlinson wrote a book called The Differentiated Classroom. And in that book, she has outlined many of these strategies and tools. She's really, here in the United States anyway, the first researcher and educator to present differentiation as a strategy for teachers and school leaders. So I want to just give her credit. This is not my, some of these strategies are things I've used, but really the theory behind all this is Dr. Tomlinson's theory. So I'm going to close with a word from Rabindranath Tagore, which I always find his words inspiring. And he wrote that the highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence. And that is certainly a very, very a laudable goal for us, right? Because we're often, as educators, we focus on the content, the information. Let's just give them information. But it's really, I think those of us that are educators now, and those of you that are students and are hoping to be teachers, we really want more than that. We want more than to deliver information. We want our students to really be productive citizens in a democracy. We want them to be educated, informed, and we want them to be in harmony. So I want to thank you for your time today. Very much appreciate your joining. There is time for questions, so I encourage you to put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand digitally, we can unmute you and you can share questions or comments or anything that is, you know, anything that's up for you. I'm happy to stick around and have more of a conversation.
Yes, students, any questions, please? So, Dr. Matthew, it was really wonderful for this wonderful session. You have explained the things in such a nice manner, and you have touched the hearts of the students and taken to the real roots. We would like to be with you quite often, and whenever you have time, and whenever you plan to visit India, please do come to Sedana Institutes to bless us, to be with us, and to guide us for our future endeavors.
Thank
So
you. I'd
nice
love
of you.
to.
So nice of you. Be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank
Have
you.
a great time.
Thank you, everyone.
Dr. Sinderbir sir, please propose a vote of thanks from your side also. Unmute yourself, sir. Dr. Matthew, please unmute Sinderbir sir.
One sec.
Yeah, it's done.
I endorse all the wordings of thanks by Madam Jyoti Sidana. I have one question before we close this meet, that you have told us about the areas of differentiation. One is content, that is what to teach. Then it is process, how to teach. Then environment, where to teach. And fourth one is product, the final evaluation or the final report of the output that we have given the input. But one thing I think there should be subjects or students should also be there in as a fifth part, because they are the main focus areas. Students who are using one box, or students who are using two boxes, or the student who is not using any box, the slow learner, medium learner, and fast learner. So area of differentiation lies in the subjects also. So if we can add one more area in it, apart from content, process, product, and environment, there should be, I think, student or subject. What do you say?
I agree, and one of the you're absolutely right. Let me just go back to a slide that addresses that. So so you're referencing this slide, and I appreciate that really important point, that the student is really at the heart of this. And yes, a key point of differentiation is understanding that every student is already differentiated. You're absolutely right. And in this graphic, it's very simply, it's height, right? But we know that some students read when they come to fifth grade, grade 5, they might be reading at grade 10 already. And some students might be reading at grade 1. So recognizing the vast differences of our students and the way that they're differentiated is key. So that's an excellent point. Thank you so much for bringing that.
Thank you. So it was a very nice experience having some words of wisdom from you about differentiation of instruction in a classroom. And I do hope that all the students who have listened to your this special webinar will put it in their practice also, and we can have a very healthy atmosphere in a classroom. Thank you very much. From Sedana Institutes, I'm really grateful to you for sparing your time for the teachers and students of our institute. Thanks once again.
Thank you for having me, and take care, everyone.
Thank you, Ji. Thanks. Thank you.